Canada's housing market is in serious trouble. For years, housing prices have been soaring across the country, outpacing wage growth, and making homeownership increasingly difficult for average Canadians. The problem is no longer confined to big cities like Toronto and Vancouver. It's spreading nationwide. And now, all eyes are on whether the market will cool down, or if we're standing on the edge of a housing collapse. In cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, housing prices have skyrocketed to levels that are completely out of reach for most people. A home that once cost $500,000 is now worth double or even triple that amount. As of 2024, the average price for a home in Toronto is over $1 million, and in Vancouver, it's even higher. These aren't just numbers, they're crushing the hopes of thousands of Canadians who dream of owning a home. But this crisis isn't just about housing prices. It's also about the rising cost of rent. As fewer people are able to buy homes, the rental market is becoming increasingly competitive. This demand has driven rent prices up to alarming levels, especially in urban areas. Rent increases of 10 to 20% in a single year have become common, and in some cases, rents have risen by over 30%. What does this mean for the average Canadian? More and more of their income is going toward paying for a place to live, leaving less for everything else, whether it's groceries, savings, or leisure. So why is this happening? The root of the crisis lies in several major factors. First, there's the issue of foreign investment. For years, wealthy investors from other countries have been buying up Canadian properties as a way to park their money in a stable economy. This has driven up demand, particularly in cities like Vancouver, where foreign buyers have been known to purchase homes they never even live in. Some of these homes sit vacant for months or even years, but their impact on the housing market is profound, pushing prices higher and making it harder for local Canadians to compete. In response, several provinces have introduced foreign buyer taxes, and the federal government has implemented policies aimed at curbing this trend. However, critics argue these measures have done little to stem the flow of foreign money into the housing market. In fact, many believe these policies are too little, too late. The market has already been pushed to a breaking point. Then, there's the issue of supply and demand. Canada is simply not building enough homes to meet the growing demand, particularly in the most desirable cities. The result? A severe housing shortage that has only been getting worse. There's also the problem of urban sprawl. While developers are building homes, many of them are being built far outside city centers, where people don't necessarily want to live. These areas lack the infrastructure, public transportation, and amenities that people need, forcing buyers to compromise between affordability and location. The government has promised to increase housing supply through various policies, but progress has been slow. In cities like Toronto, where housing demand is at its highest, local regulations and zoning laws often make it difficult to build new housing at the scale needed. NIMBYism, where local residents oppose new developments, has also slowed down construction in many urban areas. So while we're seeing some new homes being built, it's nowhere near enough to keep up with the growing population. And speaking of population growth, immigration is another factor driving housing demand. Canada has one of the highest immigration rates in the world, which is crucial for the country's long-term economic growth and demographic stability. However, the influx of new residents has added pressure to an already strained housing market. Canada welcomed over 400,000 immigrants in 2023 alone, many of whom settle in the major cities where housing is already in short supply. While immigration is essential for the country's workforce and innovation, it also means more competition for an already limited number of homes. Another critical factor in the housing crisis is interest rates. Over the past decade, Canada saw a period of historically low interest rates, which made borrowing money cheap and encouraged people to take on larger mortgages. But with inflation on the rise, the Bank of Canada has been hiking rates to cool down the economy. As of 2024, interest rates are at their highest levels in over 15 years. For homeowners, this means significantly higher mortgage payments. For first-time buyers, it means getting approved for a loan has become much more difficult, and the cost of borrowing is making homeownership even less affordable. Homeowners who bought properties when rates were low are now feeling the pinch. Many are seeing their monthly payments increase substantially, especially those with variable rate mortgages. Some are even at risk of losing their homes because they can no longer afford the rising costs. And if this trend continues, we could see a wave of foreclosures, which could further destabilize the housing market. For renters, the situation is equally grim. Rental prices have shot up in tandem with home prices, meaning that even those who aren't in the market to buy a home are being squeezed by the housing crisis. Vacancy rates in cities like Toronto and Vancouver are at all-time lows, and competition for rental units is fierce. This has led to bidding wars, even for rentals, as desperate tenants offer to pay above the asking price just to secure a place to live. Experts warn that Canada's housing market could be heading toward a tipping point. Some believe we're on the verge of a full-blown housing crash, similar to what the U.S. experienced during the 2008 financial crisis. Others argue that the market will eventually stabilize, but not before more Canadians are pushed out of homeownership altogether. And while some Canadians are holding out hope for a market correction, where prices come down to more reasonable levels, the reality is that, even if prices fall, high interest rates will keep monthly payments high, leaving housing affordability a distant dream for many. So what's the solution? Some economists and housing experts are calling for more aggressive government intervention. This could include stronger measures to limit foreign investment, policies to increase housing supply, and incentives for first-time homebuyers. Others believe that the market will correct itself naturally through higher interest rates, which will reduce demand and bring prices down over time. But whatever the solution is, one thing is clear. Something needs to change, and fast. If the housing market continues on its current trajectory, the long-term effects could be devastating, not just for those trying to buy a home, but for the entire Canadian economy. A housing market collapse could lead to widespread job losses, reduced consumer spending, and a recession. In the end, the cost of inaction could be far greater than the cost of bold reforms. But amid the doom and gloom, there's still hope. Some provinces and cities are already taking steps to address the crisis. New affordable housing projects are being launched, and governments are revisiting zoning laws to allow for more high-density developments in urban areas. There's also a growing push for more sustainable, eco-friendly housing that could help alleviate the crisis while addressing environmental concerns. However, these efforts will take time, and the question remains, will it be enough? Will policymakers act quickly and decisively to prevent the crisis from getting worse? Or will Canadians continue to face rising prices, increasing rents, and shrinking options? Canada's housing crisis is a complex problem with no easy solutions. But one thing is for sure, the choices made today will determine the future of housing for millions of Canadians.